the library here. This was day one of the all ages and abilities infrastructure going in, and people talk about, you know, an indicator species on bike lanes, and you know, when you see this, to me as an advocate, this is exactly what we're looking for. We see a parent here, two young kids, maybe 5, 6, and one that's on a Strider bike, and she's got kids in her trailer behind her. That's what we want to see. We want to be able to see kids and interact with this infrastructure and be able to get around and maybe have some autonomy. Cheaper than cars. Obviously, this is a key one. You know, they say a car, according to the Canadian Automobile Association, is over $10,000 per car per year on average to operate. I mean, I can ride my bike all year, maybe with one tune-up and a chain lube. So, you know, you look at Penticton, and we know, based on census data and other metrics, that the average household income here, even relative to the Okanagan, is low. Car operation is an extremely expensive thing. It's most household budgets, it's number 2 after housing in terms of the most expensive things in their budget. So public health benefits. Obviously, you know, there's an obesity crisis. It gets people out on their bikes. It gets them physical activity built in as part of their day. As I mentioned, I have 2 small children. I don't have a ton of time. I have a full-time job. I don't have a ton of time to exercise, but if I can get on my bike and get to work, that's helpful. No pollution, no noise. I mean, those are key. It doesn't impose danger. I know that, you know, the bike lane we've talked about, and it's been talked about in the media and things, about dangerous intersections or spots that could be dangerous. I think one thing that's key to me that I think about is the bike does not impose danger. I wrote about this in the paper, I think in the letters in the paper maybe a month ago, about the city of Toronto, and in the last 30, 35 years, they haven't had a cyclist kill one pedestrian, and people are dying crossing the street here every year. So I think that's an important thing. It reduces the car storage burden. I'll talk a little bit about that when I get to our bike valet example, but we know that, you know, 15 to 20 bikes can fit in a single car parking space. So there's efficiency of using space if we can get people on a bike. And, you know, maybe one of the more important ones is the environmental impact. Obviously, everyone's keenly aware of that here, especially what's gone on, you know, in our province in the last couple of weeks. But not only that, even more local than that, there's probably people in this room or people watching this on Zoom that, you know, were on evacuation alert or evacuated from their homes within the last year and a half. What are we doing as a city to try to reduce our carbon footprint? What are we doing as a city from a, you know, from that perspective to try to improve those things? So I think that's an important one as well. I talked about inclusivity, and that's why I brought in this picture of this tricycle too, is that, you know, it's just another example of, you know, if maybe people are getting older, they don't feel comfortable on a 2-wheeled bike balancing, you know, you have things like this adult trike, right? You've got a big basket here, you can put some groceries in there. So a bunch of the other topics I wanted to talk about is bike versus recreation versus bike for transportation. You know, Penticton, we have a rich history in biking for recreation, and that's fantastic. The Ironman, Grand Fondo, obviously the KVR is a jewel. What about biking for transportation? What are the barriers to getting more people on bikes? What can we do for individuals as a city to encourage that mode of transportation? Bike valet. So this was, I'll talk about this more in detail, but it's basically a secured bike parking solution. If any of you have been to the farmers market, we've operated at 2018, 19, and this year in 2021. It reduces one of those barriers. It's a staffed bike parking solution that encourages people to use their bike more. The Lake to Lake All Ages and Abilities route. I've spoken with a lot of people about this. Obviously, everyone's got an opinion on it. And, you know, I'm going to make a bunch of points in here in this presentation of why I think it's absolutely key, why it's absolutely a vital project for the future of transportation here in Penticton. E-bikes, an amazing thing, and you know, I talk about barriers. E-bikes, again, keeps people on their bikes, gives people the option to use a bike instead of a car, enables people to go farther, gets them to car-dependent, more traditionally car-dependent neighborhoods, which I think is important. I'll talk a little bit about bike racks, something we've been working on, and then the North Gateway project, which is a city-based project in the northwest corner of the city. This way, right? Let me try now. How's that? Okay, thanks. So again, biking for recreation versus biking for transportation. I put here historic focus versus the future. And one thing as an advocate that I would like to see, and I'd like to get away from that vision or that idea of bike for recreation. Obviously, biking for recreation is a fantastic thing. You know, the Ironman or Grand Fondo or the Kettle Valley Railway, those are great things. It keeps people on their bike and, you know, gets exercise in that thing and those sort of things. But, you know, our focus is more basic than that. It's a transportation tool that can be used to replace other trips and is really efficient. So, you know, as an advocate, I think one of the things I try to get away from is that I try not to use the word cyclist too much. I don't necessarily identify myself as what I think of the North American term cyclist to be. I think of someone who is in Lycra or someone who has a really expensive bicycle that's really light and can go really fast. That's not my vision of what I'm interested in. I'm more interested in what's going on here in these photos. There's a gentleman here with 5 children on his bike. I mean, he puts 2 on the back, he's got 1 on the front, there's a saddle in the front. It's A to B-ism essentially. They're getting from one place to the next and they're enjoying it. And then this photo here, again, this is the Burrard Street bike lane. Really, this was a road that was 3 lanes in each way, went to 2, and then bike lane on each side. And again, you know, as I do this work, I think about myself and I think about this key piece of infrastructure, the Burrard Street Bridge, as I had to go downtown, you know, from the west side of Vancouver. If that piece of infrastructure wasn't in place, I wouldn't be in front of you today. It's that simple. And so when I think about this type of work or advocacy work, I think about people here who are not biking now, and I want to get to a position in Penticton where they will feel comfortable enough to consider cycling as an option for them to get around. So really important piece for me personally in terms of, you know, when I think about what am I doing this for every day, why am I here on my vacation talking at the library, it's things like that. So what are the barriers to getting more people on bikes? You know, the city did some survey work through the Shape Your City Penticton survey portal when the start of the Lake to Lake bike route work was getting underway and the public consultation was starting. And one of the questions they asked was, if you're not biking now, why aren't you biking, or why don't you consider biking? And the number one issue was safety. People won't consider it as an option for transportation until they feel safe. So, you know, that was interesting. Obviously, or they're scared, issues with cars, right? I mean, I live a block from the Government Street bike lane, and I can tell you that in 7 years, obviously the last couple of years I haven't done it, but commuting to work, I don't use that area. I'm a block from it. I'm to the west, but I don't want to ride in the gutter of an arterial road with heavy truck traffic in my left pocket. That's not comfortable for me. I understand it works for certain people, but that's not an incentive enough for me to get on a bike. Lack of connections to key destinations, and really this is something that was so key in our advocacy work for the Lake to Lake bike route, and it goes back to the story I told you at the start of my presentation, that it was just really hard to get to the grocery store, and it wasn't fun, and it was scary. And you know, that's one of the key things that we talked about in our advocacy work on it, was that how do I get to the doctor's office safely? How do I get to the mall? I can't get to the grocery store. If I don't feel safe doing it, other people aren't going to do it either. And you know, we looked at what we had in place in terms of infrastructure, and really, like I referenced before, it was, you know, the the channel path on the First Nation land, which has 0 connections, and the Government Street route, which really is a bypass that goes up significant grades and doesn't touch a ton of key destinations like everything else in the middle of the city. Directness. How do I get from A to B fast? If we want to compete with car transportation, we need to be able to get places fast. I don't want detours. I want to go as direct as I would in any other mode, like a car. Parking security. Again, this is one I'll touch on with the bike valet, but absolutely key. Everyone's got a story, it seems like. With our bike valet, we noticed of a stolen bike. What happened? They never got their bike back. And, that can be something that gets people off their bike and they don't do it anymore. Cargo capacity. So I kind of touched on it here with my photos. Again, that's my cargo bike. That's my son. There we are behind the library here. But even something as simple as a basket. I mean, something like this makes it so much easier to use a bike for any sort of trip. Or maybe if you, for spontaneity, you leave somewhere on your bike, but you don't know what you're going to do or what you're going to buy, what you're going to use it for. Well, something simple as a basket with a bungee cord can really reduce that barrier of using a bike. Weather, we're a little bit lucky in Penticton that we don't have these issues like places like Montreal as much. Obviously, maybe people aren't going to ride 12 months a year here, but I mean, here we are. Tomorrow's going to be December, and I looked, it's going to be 17 degrees here tomorrow. So, weather is a thing that we can make accommodations for. It was in the paper about the snow clearing of the bike route. So, something that's key, and people in Finland and people in Montreal and places with extreme weather can ride their bikes if you have to make the right accommodations for them. Hills, I'll talk a little bit about this on e-bikes, but the e-bikes have the opportunity to make really anywhere in Penticton bikeable. So the bike valet. So when I was getting started in this advocacy work, a few of my friends here, actually they're right in this photo, Tricia here is one of them, and we said to ourselves, there's about 3 or 4 of us who got together, and obviously as an advocate, we don't have the ability ourselves to change the streets and make accommodations to make it safe for people to bike. So, for us to make those changes, essentially it's a political exercise. We need to show people or city leaders that, as I said here in my point, if you build it, they will come. So there was 3, 4, 5 of us that got into a room and tried to brainstorm different ideas about how could we move the needle forward in Penticton? How could we encourage politicians to consider investments in bike infrastructure? What could we show the citizens of Penticton to dispel that myth that why would we invest in bike infrastructure? No one bikes. And to that I say, exactly, that's a big problem. So this was something that we came up with, and this is not a new idea. And I think, some of the stuff when we look at bike infrastructure, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. We can just copy what other cities are doing and doing well. And the Bike Valet was a nonprofit service. There's one that operates in Vancouver that I used for a number of things. They'll operate at big events like BC Lions games. You can find them at their farmers markets. And so obviously, our farmers market's a huge draw. People love it every Saturday. And I was down there, I guess in 2017, I noticed, wow, there's quite a few people that bike to this, or there's some people. We don't have a lot of racks around here. People are locking their bike to a tree or to a parking meter or something that's not secure. And I thought, we as a group got together and said, what if we set up a bike valet? This was something that was achievable for us as a nonprofit organization. As you can see here, we bought a bunch of racks. So we bought these racks, we did a little bit of fundraising. City gave us some an in-kind donation in terms of the rental of this park right next to that beautiful garden there, down next to City Hall in the 100 block of Main Street. But this was something that we could do fairly easily. I think as we started, we fundraised a little bit of money. I think those racks were $200 or $300 a piece. We bought 6 or 7 of them. We borrowed this tent from another nonprofit, and we just showed up one day at the farmers market with bike racks, 6 bike racks, and some construction fencing. We didn't know how it would go, but we thought, let's do it. Let's just show up, a couple of us as volunteers, and just as an example of, hey, we're here for people. If you want a bike, we want to support you. And so the first week we set up and we parked 10 bikes. But what was probably more interesting is people would come up to us at our table and say, now that you're here, I'm going to bike next week, or I'm going to tell my son about this, or we will bike down together if you'll do this for us. So again, it's like a coat check for your bike. People come, they bring their bike, we give them a tag just like you would at a coat check. It's free to use. It reduces that barrier to bike use, obviously theft, and it's staffed. So, you know, as I said, in week 1, I think we did 20 weeks. The first year at the Bike Valet, first week we did 10 bikes. And by the end, we were 100 bikes a week some weeks. And in week 1, or year 1, we did 800. Year 2, we did 1,200, and then we were shut down for, we didn't operate in 2020, and then 2021 we were back. So I don't know the exact number, but we're well over 2,300 bikes. It could be closer to 2,500. And we've operated 3 years at the farmers market now, and we're excited to come back for 2022. But you know, we took this example of a bike valet, and this was really our leverage, we thought, in terms of trying to make physical improvements or advocating for physical improvements to the road network here in Penticton to encourage it. So we basically took this bike valet example at the end of 2018, 2019 to the city, and we made a presentation, my friend here, Tricia, and I, who's right in this photo here, at the start of 2019, and we made a pitch, and we basically said, hey, look what we're doing here with our bike valet. We did very little. We bought a bunch of we bought some racks. We have some volunteers. We borrowed a tent. We just sat there and watched people's bikes for them for 5 hours a week for 20 weeks. Look what that netted out as in terms of people thinking about using a bike for transportation. We did absolutely nothing to the road network. We really did nothing to make the experience on a bike safer at all. But people used it. So at that time, the city was warm to our pitch, and they encouraged, I think they did a study at that time about, you know, a priority for, you know, reinstituting at least a portion of this 2012 bike plan. And then we also pitched them on bike racks, some additional bike racks around town, based on just things that we've seen around supporting people using a bike, and I'll touch on that a little bit. So they invested some money in some best practice bike infrastructure, bike parking, straightforward bike parking, and that's sort of where the lake to lake route began or restarted. So the lake to lake all ages and abilities route, you know, obviously this is, as I said earlier, everyone's got an opinion on it. We're really excited, you know, the work that's gone on so far, and you know, even though we've only got a couple kilometers built so far, and we don't have a ton of connections, you know, it's really inspiring to see the work. So this is an all ages and abilities route, and maybe Ian from the city will touch on it, you know, during the question period if anyone has any questions on it. So you know, it's referred to as 8 to 80. So in other words, it's comfortable for someone who's 8 years old, it's comfortable for someone who's 80 years old, or even younger than that, or even older than that. And you know, that's some of the things we're seeing. Like you know, I showed you that picture of day one of the bike route with a mom, and I can't even remember, at least 3 children, you know, under the age of 7 out there using it in day one. And here's another photo I took of a dad coming from down Eckerd Avenue and then heading south using the infrastructure with his son, who was, you know, maybe 5, and another child in the bike. So, you know, those are things that from an advocacy organization, that's what we're looking for. We want to see folks like that using it because we feel like we've done something. Again, it's relatively direct. If you look at the route here, obviously, what we want is something as straight and linear as possible that connects with as many amenities as possible. I think for the route, as it netted out, one thing that's tough about Penticton, and I always compare things to Vancouver, which I know it's not a great comparison, but one thing that I've found here is that, we don't have a typical grid, and you can sort of see that if you look at this map here. When places with more of a typical grid, they can use streets that are off arterials pretty easily and make physical treatments that are simpler, that really can get you a network quickly. One thing in Penticton is obviously the roads. Everyone knows, out here where Main Street is, essentially it's a 4-lane highway with a ton of driveways and curb cuts, so it's more challenging to build there. But we're really excited about all the connections we've got, and like I said earlier, the connections, the key amenities. With Martin Street, you're 1 block off Main, 1 block off Winnipeg, right in the middle of this, the downtown, all the employment centers downtown. We've obviously got the library, things like the Safeway Plaza, and obviously with Section 2, we're going to get even more with the library and schools and some of the more dense housing in Penticton. So again, it's on the flat part of the city that it enables more people to use their bike. Is if we can keep it on the flat. That's one of the things that's nice about Penticton is most of the amenities are in the flat sort of valley bottom, that if the accommodations are made, it can be safe. So, and as probably everyone in this room knows, Section 3 and 4 are now finished right up to that red line there. That's kind of down near Duncan Avenue. And Section 2, this Atkinson bit, as well as the Duncan Avenue connection at Atkinson, is set to be built in 2022. The city's budget process just wrapped up last week, and as of right now, the money's in there, ready for final adoption of the budget. So, this is, from an advocacy group point of view, this is really, really exciting. And, to see it come to fruition is extremely rewarding. Look at the next one here, Chandra. E-bikes. So, at our Bike Valet, I think, sometimes you think you start these ideas and, especially something that can be as polarizing as bike lane or bike infrastructure. Someone like me as an advocate, you get an idea in your head of, I think, younger people are going to be interested in these ideas, and people that are seniors or older adults are going to hate this. And what we found with our Bike Valet in particular is that it couldn't be further from the truth. That's such a myth. And we've really found that, our clientele at the Bike Valet largely is seniors, people at 55 plus, and a ton of them on these e-bikes, and that it enables them to get on their bike again and gives them a smile on their face. And maybe some of you in this room are even using them, but obviously there's a huge boom in usage and sales the last few years. If you're in the bike shops, you see them, and sometimes they can be hard to find. And one thing that's important, I think, really important in terms of, replacing car trips is that idea that they can serve traditionally car-dependent neighborhoods. And what I mean is areas that with a traditional bike you would have never got up and down from, or you would never use a bike for transportation. I have a couple personal friends. I have a friend who lives up at the top of the Wiltsey neighborhood, and he's riding his bike every week to the curling rink. He's riding his bike to the golf course. He's riding his bike to the grocery store. That would have never happened without the invention of the e-bike. So, it can serve traditionally car-dependent neighborhoods. I've got another friend who lives way up high on West Bench. Again, he would have never, and he never did use a bike for getting to and from work before the e-bike. Now he's doing it every single day. So, that's it really can shift those transportation patterns. ability to carry more heavier loads. You know, I talked about my cargo
Well, it costs you
bike
the same to
with
build,
my
but
son in it, and here's a photo of one here with an electric assist motor. I mean, you know, this gentleman here has got, you know, it looks like almost an adult, maybe his wife on the back, and 3 kids in the front. And for me, I have 2 kids now. One's 4 and one's 6 months, and I'm getting to the point where it's going to be hard for me to move my 2 kids around in Penticton without some electric assist help. But you know, I can buy a bike like this, and I can stay on my bike, and I can take them to the park, and I can take them to the grocery store, or I can go visit my friend at the top of Wiltshire if I want to. So, you know, it really is a game changer in terms of transportation, particularly I think in Penticton, because you know a lot of the amenities, like I said, are on the flat, but a lot of the housing is up on the hills and areas that would be hard to get up and down on a bike. You know, there's a lot of studies out there that show you still got a lot of exercise using an e-bike, and you can bike in your regular clothes. As my you know, in my advocacy, like Chandra said, I'm a tax collector with the Canada Revenue Agency, and typically I work down on Winnipeg Street, and we have a bike cage, you know, basically a fenced area with a lock with racks. And you know, when I did meet with my colleagues in a workplace, you know, I would talk to my colleagues who I knew had an interest in riding bikes, and they would say, I'm not going to ride my bike because I'm sweaty when I get to work. I don't want to, there's nowhere to shower here. I'm out of breath. I don't want to, I can't get a shower, so I'm not going to bike here. And, you know, we looked at, you know, making accommodations in the building for showers and things. But now you've got e-bikes, and people can get to their workplace without sweating, even in areas that are car dependent. So, you know, it can make a difference. It keeps people on bikes who may not be able to bike otherwise. And we see examples of that here in Penticton. I mean, I'm familiar with a gentleman here who's bought, I showed you on one of my early slides, a gentleman that was riding a picture of an adult tricycle. And now, if you don't have the balance, you can get, it's possible to get a bike with some electric help that's a tricycle, and you can get around. Probably many of you have seen the Cycling Without Age program that we're lucky enough to have in Penticton, that takes people out on bikes and gives them rides for people who can't ride anymore. It's with two wheels in the front and one in the back. So, you know, this electric help on bikes has really made an important difference. Car replacement, reduced car usage. Again, I kind of touched on that a bunch of times. But it has the ability to replace those trips. And lastly, there's you know, the BC, I just mentioned the BC Scrap It program. That's a program you could look up at provincial government program that if you trade in an old clunker car, or you get rid of an old clunker car, you can get a credit towards an e-bike. And there's even municipalities, Saanich is one, Nelson is another, that have introduced municipal programs to either grants or bursaries for folks to purchase e-bikes. So it's you know, they can be expensive, but you know, pretty neat tool. Bike racks. So, you know, as I talked about, you know, that was really my interest, or my start in doing this advocacy work was bike parking. So, you know, it's something that's near and dear to our heart. Bike best practice racks added in recent years. You know, when I was talking about going to council, we got a bunch more of these. You would call them a staple rack or something like that. This is and there's one actually out front of the library here, which I parked my bike to when before I walked in. But you know, this type of simple bike rack, but it enables a heavy-duty U-lock to be locked to the frame of the bike. You know, in terms of simple bike racks, inexpensive, that's what we want to see. The city's invested a little bit more money in those, and you'll see them. If you see any of them in Penticton, they're black, and right here on this part, they've got a little picture with the city logo. This is more sort of an old-fashioned type bike rack. We call them wheel benders. or wave racks. We've been trying to, in our advocacy work with the city, trying to get away from investing in this type of bike rack infrastructure. Number one, they don't support the weight of the bike. Second thing that's key in terms of bike security is you lose the ability to rack the bike with a heavy duty U-lock because it's just locked to the wheel. You need something like a cable lock, which are much less secure. You know, we want folks to be able to use the heavy duty U-lock as much as possible. I joke with people that, you know, if you're locking your bike up with a cable lock, you know, it's like tying your bike up with a rope. I mean, we need to really enable people to use a heavy duty lock where, at least if they're going to lose their bike, it's going to be, you know, through an angle grinder or somebody using really more sophisticated techniques. But secure bike parking, this is something that's really a project for us. We frankly haven't made any headway on it yet, but what we would like to see in Penticton is more of, or at least some investment in secure bike parking. We do have, the city's added some bike lockers on the old Greyhound lot in the last couple of years. One thing that you lose out on that is you don't have complimentary access. So, you know, one person can use it, then they leave and someone else uses it. The lockers we have right now at the Government Street or on the old Greyhound lot are really for one person all the time. So this is an example right here. This is an installation in Brooklyn, New York. It's a company called Uni, but essentially this is a secure bike parking area that has complimentary access. So in other words, there's just racks on the inside, but you have a key fob or you have some sort of code on your phone that enables anyone to get into it and use it 24 hours a day. We found that, you know, people that use our service at the Bike Valet, particularly people that are using an e-bike, they don't feel comfortable locking up a bike and just leaving it somewhere on a rack like this for hours at a time if they're spending $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And really, it's actually even more than that. If you have a net worth of zero and your bike is worth $200, it's as important to you as someone who is comfortable financially that has a bike that's worth $5,000. So we would like to see that more. Something that we continue to advocate for the city is secure bike parking with complimentary access. Bike cages, see that a little bit around Penticton. I can see that the city of Penticton really recently paved their back parking lot. They put in one there, I assume, for their employees. As I touched on my work at the CRA, we have one behind our building, and really it's a pretty straightforward, you know, chain link fence with a roof on it and a lock. But sometimes that'll encourage more people to get out on their bikes. So yeah, this is the last thing I was going to talk about. You know, and in our advocacy work, as I sort of stated earlier, we're focused on important areas of the city, or we want to be able to get as many people on bikes as possible. And this is an interesting opportunity in my opinion. So probably a bunch of you are familiar with this. This is the North Gateway Redevelopment Investment Strategy area that the city is focused on right now. And redeveloping this area, seeing what they can do with some of these parcels of land. There's some residential development happening now, sort of down off Riverside Drive and different things. But you know, this is a really exciting opportunity. You know, we talk about, you know, the lake to lake route and all the connections. This is an area that we would really like to see some investments in. You know, you look at the SOEC as an example, and you know, I would use that facility fairly often for obviously and many people probably do here, but you know, for the pool and the community center and the SOEC. And you know, I've been to events where, you know, a sold out concert, at least pre-COVID, a sold out concert where there's nowhere to park, there's no parking spots, and there's one bike in the bike rack, sold out concert in the middle of the city. So, you know, that's an enormous opportunity. And you know, from an advocacy organization, we look and go, obviously we look backwards and go, why are people not biking here? And our view is, you know, if you ride down Westminster right now, you're riding between moving cars and parked cars. Wade Avenue doesn't really have enough room for both moving cars and parked cars, so they allow parked cars to, park on the sidewalk essentially, which makes it even worse for pedestrians. So, this is a really exciting project for us. We're involved in it a little bit, and we want to see some of these connections made better, maybe to, as a spur off of our lake-to-lake route. And it's not only even the SOEC campus, but, you look in Penticton now, and I don't have the numbers, but, our friends over on the First Nation, the Penticton Indian Band, the Channel Pathway, that's probably the most well-used piece of bike infrastructure in Penticton right now. And the connections into Penticton down here are very poor. As I mentioned, my friend coming from the West Bench every day, riding his bike downtown, connections really just terrible right here. So that prevents anyone from coming down here and going into the middle of the city. So, that's another thing that, just a ton of opportunity. In this work, you try not to be too negative and focus on the positives and see the opportunity. And the SOEC, as it says here, campus, and the Westminster corridor, just enormous opportunities to have broader discussions with right-sizing the roads and better accommodate people on bike, and not only on bike, on foot. I haven't touched on the pedestrian realm at all, but really important. And not only those things, but as I touched on in earlier, more efficient use of the parking area. I guess I did touch on that with the full parking and one bike in the rack. But yeah, so I think that's the last slide. I put a couple pictures in here. Thanks for listening and giving me the opportunity, Chandra, to come down here. I just there's my son and I right behind where we're standing now with 30 bikes, 30 books from the library, 2 backpacks, a bike, and I'm a pretty keen golfer, so even things like on my cargo bike, I can put my big golf cart bag with everything I need in a cart. But anyway, thanks for the opportunity to do this. If anyone had any questions for me, I could probably answer a couple, or maybe Ian from the city of Penticton, if there was more questions specifically about the lake-to-lake route. Thank you. Yeah. You're interested in the Staples parking lot? How is it mounted? Yep. Oh, where can you buy one of those racks? Yeah, good question. They are available. I think the merchant that the city used was Urban Racks. Is that right, Ian? There's a number. I probably doesn't want to endorse one. I know Urban Racks is one that I gave as an example to the golf club, Penticton Golf Club. They have a bunch, and you can purchase them there. Urban Racks, they're pretty great. They have a whole bunch of different ones and custom. Yeah. Yep. Correct. Yep. Yeah. Oh, from your strata. You get fined from the strata for parking there. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And the other thing too is, you talk about Cherry Lane Towers, and I mentioned it a little bit, and that area is going to be right on the bike route. And I'm in the same position with you. I would be pressing my strata if I was in your position, going, hey, there's going to be more people using bikes here. We need to invest. Yeah, yeah, I can appreciate that. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. 40 suites, right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm with you. I mean, I would, I mean, that's some of the things that we get into, and with bike parking, and a lot of the times we'll find that we can't advocate for certain spots because it's on private property, and the city won't be able to rack. But I sympathize with what you're going through, and if I was, and I appreciate you've already made this point, but I would be really drumming home to that strata that we need to make these accommodations, and yeah, yeah, yeah. So the question was, is the all ages and abilities route for mopeds, longboards, scooters, or is it strictly bikes? Maybe Ian can answer this better. I can't tell you from a Motor Vehicle Act perspective what the answer is. I can tell you from an advocacy point of view, we want everybody using that. We love to see people in mobility scooters on them. I mean, that's one thing that I've noticed in the last few weeks is you'll see, I touched on it with a gentleman before my talk, but you'll see folks on mobility scooters riding next to each other. And we love that as an advocacy organization. We love people using it. And I look at it and go, why would people use this as on a mobility scooter? Well, of course, if you're in a mobility scooter, our sidewalks aren't wide enough almost anywhere where you can ride next to your friend in a mobility scooter and chat. So we love to see that I can tell you from the cycling club, we love to see people using it, a skateboard, whatever they're using. But I can't answer that from a legal point of view. I don't know if you had anything to touch on or add to that, Ian. Yeah, so the question was, is there a plan for the city to start a bike rental service? And Ian's answer to that was no. I can say from our point of view with the Cycling Association, we'd love to see that. I mean, maybe at some point with the further build out of the infrastructure, we get to a point where somebody that's in that business wants to do that here. I think we would love that. It's a service I used in Vancouver, the bike rental service. When I go there now, I use it and use it for one-way trips, and we would love to see that here. But yeah, no plans as of right now. Yeah. So I think the question was are there any plans to improve the channel path? Is that fair?
Thank you for the question. There are no immediate plans to improve the pathway. That is on Penticton Indian Band land. However, I can tell you that there are discussions that have been ongoing now for quite a while, and they're still continuing for more cooperative ventures, which would include things like the channel pathway improvement, but nothing specific that I can tell you right now.
Because it is badly needed, like the surface is getting worse and worse and worse, so it would be so nice.
Yep.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I joined PACA, Penticton Area Cycling Association, to show my support for the voice that the organization has for cyclists and general usage. And I would just like to encourage others who use the bike path or think it's a great idea to also consider joining the organization to strengthen their voice with the city and show that you're, as a resident or a person interested in cycling, believe in this as a benefit to the city. It's not expensive, and I'm sure that is.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So just for those watching on Zoom, gentlemen, just mentioned for people to consider, if they feel this work is important, to consider supporting us as members of the Penticton Area Cycling Association. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm a regular brown bag attendee. That's how I got here. I didn't come to see your talk. But I'm having problems making this all add up. I mentioned today that how nice the weather is out there and great for cycling, and I'm sure it is. Again, on Sunday, I was in, and at 11 o'clock in the morning, it wasn't raining, it was exceptionally warm, and I did Martin Street, and there wasn't one bike in bike lane, not one. So again this morning I came and took a look, and I took some pictures. I did Martin Street from Lakeshore for Pittsburgh Road here, and there was not one bike. I went down Prairie Road, and there was one bike on that whole thing on a day like this. Now, I went to school right in this spot. I did my grade 2 and 3 right here, and learned my math. And I'm having trouble with the math I learned, adding up to what's going on here.
Sure. Yeah.
What I'm missing?
Sure. I would say from a accommodation point of view, we're just at the beginning of the work. I think, you know, you say there's not many people using it, and I agree with you. It's not being used that much yet. I would say we're in the middle of a construction phase. The project isn't done, and I would say when you look at a couple things I would add to that in terms of when you look at a road network, I would say it only works as a network when more and more pieces connect together. You can get to all the different places. If we had a road network that accommodated cars on only, you know, a kilometer or two of a 300-kilometer road network, you'd probably come to me and say the same thing and say, there's no one driving. And I would say, well, there's no one driving because there's nowhere to move your car around the city. So I would say, I understand where you're coming from. That's what I would say, number one. Number two, I would say there's many infrastructure things that are used seasonally. There's many pieces of infrastructure that folks from the community never use. That, in my view, is not a reason to build something or not build something. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like, you know, I like to curl. We have a building here for curling that's owned by the city. Curling goes 3 months a year. There's not a huge amount of people that do it, and no one does it for 8 or 9 months a year. I don't think that's a reason to say we shouldn't have curling, or we shouldn't support hockey, or we shouldn't support other infrastructure things. I think there's things for everyone in the community, and I agree with you that not everyone's going to use it. I would never disagree with you on that point, but I don't think, in my view, that's a reason to do it or not do it. Yeah.
I'd like to just quickly respond to that. We're relatively new to Penticton here, and we've lost the
Yeah, so the question was, we have people riding on, as an observation, we have people riding on Main Street, riding on the sidewalk, and we need to get those people riding the bike lane. And I agree with you, and it is dangerous. And I think that comes with more investment in the infrastructure. I mean, when I moved here from Vancouver, I was shocked to see people ride on the sidewalk. I never saw that in Vancouver. I think, number one, obviously in Vancouver more people walk, so it's not even feasible to do it. But I agree with you, it's dangerous, and yeah, we need more people using it, I think. But many areas, I think it's for many folks, most places of Penticton that aren't comfortable riding in traffic, unfortunately, it's the rational choice. I mean, I wouldn't want to ride between parking and moving cars if I think I could be doored, where I know I'm not going to die on the sidewalk, at least on that particular part. But it gets into other issues about the intersections, and it isn't safe. I agree with you, but more work to be done there for sure. Unfortunately, I have a paid job that I need to go back to as well. So I think maybe I can take one more, or we take one more. Is that fair?
Or just finish off?
Oh, go ahead.
On that same question, I just want to point out it is illegal to do that unless there is a bylaw issued by the city that says you can ride on sidewalks, and we don't have such a bylaw. The only walkways that you can ride your bike on are walkways that are signed as such. A good example of that would be the Okanagan Lake Walkway, for instance, or the KBR track. Otherwise, you should not be on there. Enforcement, however, is another matter, and the city would love to, through a coordinated program of education and with some soft enforcement, encouraging people that they should be on the road, particularly if there's a bike lane there. I've seen people riding on the sidewalk next to a bike lane on a road, so we have to gradually, as you say, transition them back to where they should be.
Maybe one more, yeah. Why is physical separation needed for cars from bikes? Safety. Safety would be my answer. She hasn't seen that anywhere else. I would look around a little bit more.
I would just like to say thank you, everyone, for coming. This is certainly a topic that gets everybody interested and participating. So I do appreciate you, Matt, for coming in. And thank you, Ian, who just walked out the door.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity, Chandra.